Yeah, we're on. All right. Welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's time for our first ever live stream. Here we go. Not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm excited. And we're finally past the draft. So we have a much clearer picture of what's going to go on in the NFL in terms of rosters. There's still a few more free agents yet to sign, but for the most part, we are set. So perfect time to do a mock draft. We're in the lobby waiting. This starts in about 15 seconds. So why not take a bong rip? It's almost 4:20, and things are about to get rolling. So let's have some fun. Let's kick things off and get the channel rolling in 2023. A little bit different this time. It feels nice. I'm a little nervous, to be honest with you, but I've been wanting to do one of these live streams for a while, and now's my chance. So let's get it going. All right. Boy, feels good. But yeah, things are moving. Okay, so Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey go off the board, and I feel like you got to go wide receiver round one here on Underdog. You start 3 of them every single week, and if you miss out on the top tier, you're really sitting behind the 8 ball for the rest of your draft. You need that solid foundation of multiple receivers, and it really falls off in terms of like tier breaks once you pass the second round. Like once you're out of the top 10, it's hard to get another receiver that replicates that type of week in, week out production. So as long as we get someone in the top 7 at receiver, I think we're set. That is kind of my tier break. Devontae Adams is pretty much the last guy. Damn, we do not. I'd be really stoked for that, but I think the next best option, my wide receiver 5 this year, is Stephon Diggs. So let's go with Diggs, and we are sitting pretty with him. So I'm a little bit worried about Dalton Kincaid messing with, the overall, what's it called, target share for this team, but I don't think it's going to affect Stephon Diggs. If anyone's really going to miss out on this, based on Dalton Kincaid arriving in Buffalo, it would be Gabe Davis. I think he's probably the biggest loser, along with Dawson Knox as well, but I feel like Kincaid is much more of a receiving threat that could limit the wide receiver 2. Brought in Deontay Hardy, and Khalil Shakir is probably going to take another step. They did let go of Isaiah McKenzie, though, so that probably is okay, but Diggs signed a big extension last year, and he's good to go. He's definitely a first-round pick, so I'm good with that, but in round 2 is where I think you can pivot to running back. It depends on who is there, though. Like, boy, Tony Pollard really came out of the draft looking like a good pick. I kind of want to put him at number 3, honestly, like behind CMC, behind Eckler. I can't say I fully trust Taylor after last year, and as high as I am on Bijan, I feel like Atlanta is a little bit hard to fully trust. That offense is a little bit difficult. He's so talented, though. He's definitely at least top 5, but I still prefer Tony Pollard. I think Pollard is really set up for a dominant workload in Dallas there, and Deuce Vaughn behind him, along with Malik Davis and Ronald Jones. Not big competition. Pollard on the franchise tag is going to be given a chance to shine. So that, I think, is my preference, but I don't know if we have to reach on him here. There's also another tier break at wide receiver. I don't want to go Josh Allen. It's tempting, but I don't think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown if he is still available after this pick. Yeah, like I mentioned, those 3 wide receiver slots are really important to fill, and that's why I'm just going to get who I think is the best player available. Jalen Waddle is also tempting as top 10, but boy, with Jared Goff having a fire under his ass, I think that Hendon Hooker pickup is going to make him play extra well. Jameson Williams getting suspended for at least 6 weeks. Amon-Ra St. Brown's really going to dominate, and he's definitely a locked-in wide receiver 1. So to have Diggs and St. Brown is a really good combo, and we won't have to hammer receiver too much later on in the draft. It's going to be a nice pair here that are pretty much going to start almost every single week. Like, you got to think about how you're filling in your roster, and you don't want to have too much talent at the top on your bench. I think it's nice on Underdog to get really good talent, elite tier players at every position, at least one, and then kind of hammer out the bench with a lot of, plug and play type of guys, not the most like volume driven players in your bench. I think is the better way to go. So being able to move off of wide receiver at the top, like in the middle rounds, when you're still getting like really good running backs, really good tight ends, is I think a luxury that will play into our hands, because some teams are really going to favor that position where we might be able to move off of it with a little extra comfort knowing that Diggs and St. Brown are on our roster. So let's take a look at the draft board. How is this going? So we're not the only team to go double wide receiver, but A.J. Brown and Devontae Adams is a really good combo. Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, I wouldn't say is as good as ours. I think, at least the wide receiver position so far, we have the biggest advantage coming out of 2 rounds. But Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, also really good. That's probably better than our combo. So even though that is our strength so far, I wouldn't say it's like the best. So these 2 bookend teams are the ones I want to keep an eye on. I feel like at least right now we got to compete with them a little bit more so than the rest. But I like this Kelsey Pollard team quite a bit. The Bijan Robinson Breece Hall team is stacked, but if they hit running back a little too much the rest of the draft, I think they could be at a massive disadvantage. CMC, Jalen Hurts, Etienne in the same boat. I feel like if they don't move off of running back for a considerable amount of time, then that's a strategy that could kind of mess you up as we go along. But really good talent. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I think, is arguably the quarterback one. A big reach on Mahomes at 9th overall. Dang, I would not recommend doing that. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Mahomes in round 1. I think that's just a bit too high for me, and that's just my opinion. But let's get back to the draft. Who are available players? Boy, Kenneth Walker takes a big hit with Zach Charbonnet coming in. You know who I actually really love? Najee Harris. Najee Harris is actually really tempting. He's putting up over 14 points a game. We're not going to reach on him here, but I'd really love to get him with our next pick. He's going off 39 overall. We have 41. Hopefully he falls, but that would be ideal if we can get him. Okay, so I can't say I love the receiver, so we're definitely moving off of that position. It'd be nice to get our favorite running back, but because of where he's going, I'm going to take a chance that he's available later on, and I'm going to get Lamar Jackson, who I think has not appropriately risen in the ADP just yet. I think he's probably more valuable than Justin Fields. Getting OBJ, Zay Flowers are huge for that offense, but with the deal finally taking place, you know he's going to get, if he gets hurt, there's more incentive for him not to spend the entire year on the bench. Like, he was supposed to come back in December last year, and he didn't, because I think he was a free agent, and he didn't want to risk, not getting that contract. Now that he has the contract, I think you can take a big sigh of relief when it comes to the Ravens. And Lamar, when it comes to his ceiling, it's hard to replicate. He's definitely top 5 at the worst. And here in best ball, it's very valuable. He is a bit more of an injury concern. So to get him in round 3, I think is appropriate value. The risk is kind of baked in. I don't think he's as good as Jalen Hurts for sure. But I feel like the value on Lamar Jackson is going to rise from the ADP. At 38 right now, I don't think that's where he's going to end up going. Let's hope we get Najee. That'd be really nice. And then once this pick is over, we'll take a look at the board. But boy, hopefully we can get Najee locked into a ton of volume. Second year in a row where he got 10 touchdowns, and I know he took a big dip, but part of that was the quarterback situation where at first it was Trubisky, then Pickett was figuring things out. But the last 9 games for the Steelers are the ones that you want to pay attention to. That's where they went 7-2 and made their playoff push. Najee Harris is still available, and during that stretch that I'm talking about, those last 9 games, Najee Harris put up 14 and a half fantasy points. He was in that top 12 class of running back where you can feel pretty comfortable in terms of his floor. I think there's a massive tier break following Najee Harris, and he's in the same tier as a guy like Ramondre Stevenson. Sorry for the what's it called? What just happened? I don't know. I'm still getting used to this live stream thing, so bear with me a little bit. But boy, this is weird. This is a little bit weird. Okay, I'm figuring it out. I am figuring this shit out. But I gotta move my thing. How do we do this? Okay, there we go. There we go. All right. Mentioning those teams on the bookends one more time. You can't see. Okay, shit. I'm getting used to this. Yeah, let's just put me at the top for a second. Let's look at all the teams. This A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore team is a little bit scary, but I think there's a big reach on DJ Moore. I don't think he's really worth a 4th-round pick. I'm really worried about it. And at some point, this team has to move off the position if they really want to have a full roster. So I'm not too worried about that team anymore. Eckler, Ramondre Stevenson, Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley is a decent combo. But in terms of teams with the same type of build as ours, like this one has Cooper Kupp, Saquon, Fields, and Hopkins, I feel better about our team. I mean, yes, Barkley's better than Najee, but I feel pretty good about what we got. So since our Najee pick, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, Mark Andrews, Jahmyr Gibbs, Drake London, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, Keenan Allen, I don't think you're getting a running back with as much of a guarantee as Najee. There might be some higher upside picks. Like if Jahmyr Gibbs really hits year one, then boy, that's an interesting spot for him. But I'm a little bit worried about it. I mean, there's David Montgomery there as well, and there's just bad mojo. Their running backs are kind of hard to predict, and it's just a huge committee. It's not a committee when it comes to Najee, and that's why I feel better. Like even Kenneth Walker is in a committee as well. You can argue Travis Etienne is in a bit of a committee. They got Tank Bigsby there. Dearness Johnson also signed in free agency. Najee only has to compete with Jaylen Warren, and he's looking up. They got a lot of offensive linemen as well in the draft. I feel good about Najee Harris and his stock rising this year. But we're almost back on the clock here, so let's take a look at who's available. I think TJ Hawkinson is pretty solid, but at some point we got to address running back too, and this is a good range, I think, to hit it. Damn, Miles Sanders goes off. That's unfortunate. So maybe we pass, but I think Christian Kirk is actually really valuable. We were seeing so many targets in that offense, a lot of fantasy points for the Jags last year, and I don't think Ridley is going to damage his value too much. I still think Kirk is a 12.5 point type of fantasy player per game. That's really valuable, really consistent, and I'm pretty comfortable with Christian Kirk as our wide receiver 3. The floor is really solid. He fell a few spots, and there's a chance that he's really the wide receiver 1 for that team moving forward. Yes, Calvin Ridley is more talented, arguably should be the better player, but Kirk has the connection. Ridley's been out of the league for a year. Maybe he's really hungry and he's really prepared to go, but there are some question marks with him. Kirk has a bit of a safer floor, and he's going almost 2 full rounds later. It's a big difference between the two. Ridley went off at pick 38. They got Christian Kirk at pick 56. I don't think it's a big difference between the two, and I'm really happy to have Kirk on our team. I think wide receivers really valuable in the 4th and 5th round, and if you can get your number 3 receiver in this range, you have a very, very good floor. So now we're going to focus on that flex position, RB2 tight end, and hopefully, we can feel really good about our roster coming out of, like, I feel like the first 8 rounds are really the crux of your team, and then after that it's kind of just like, where's the value, who's the best player available, and take some flyers for upside. But those first 8 rounds, you can't miss on them if you want to have a good competing chance, because only 3 teams make their money back in these underdog drafts, so that's a 25% chance just to break even. And it's not like you make a lot of money if you get second place. Like, it's all about getting first in this format. And this is a $3 draft, trying to turn that into 20. That's a decent return on investment. But otherwise, it's like you're probably just going to lose that money. So why not take some flyers on some good picks? But all right, who are we targeting? Running back is probably the way to go here. And a guy like Pacheco right now is really interesting, but I don't think he'll be the only running back by the time we get to August. I think they're probably either bringing back Jerick McKinnon or maybe signing a veteran. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Zeke found his way to Kansas City, or, I don't know, Leonard Fournette signed there. I feel like the Chiefs are going to add someone else. But right now, Pacheco is a bit of a winner coming out of the draft. Not much more competition for him. I also like DeAndre Swift's situation in Philly, but J.K. Dobbins has almost no competition. He's also in this Baltimore setting, and if he can start catching passes, especially in the red zone, Dobbins could be a top 10 running back. Like, when Lamar was a MVP that year, Mark Ingram was RB8 on the season because he caught 5 receiving touchdowns. If that can go to J.K. Dobbins, then strap in for some success. I think having Lamar is another incentive to go with Baltimore here, and J.K. Dobbins is in the same tier as, I think, DeAndre Swift. Definitely a top 20 running back if he stays healthy. There's some elite upside because, yes, I know Gus Edwards is there, kind of vultures some touchdowns away from him. However, J.K. Dobbins runs for like 6 yards per carry sometimes. He is really, really talented, and he could do a lot of damage in the NFL next season now that he's finally healthy. Like, that's what we've been waiting for with J.K. But if it works out, it works out, and having Lamar pairing him with Dobbins could be a really successful combo. I feel pretty good about that situation. But right now on the clock, this team has Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, JSN, and now Dameon Pierce. Pretty solid team, like elite talent at the top. If Mark Andrews returns to like tight end 2 viability, then that pick is worth it. But last year there were some really rough weeks for Andrews. He was barely putting up like top 10 numbers for like a full month-long stretch at one point, and I worry about him a little bit, especially with a lot of receivers coming in. His target share is definitely going to fall, and I don't feel comfortable with Andrews as the second tight end off the board. I prefer Kittle, but honestly, like, if you get tight end 4 off the board in round 5, like TJ Hawkinson here, I think you get the best value overall. I think that's the way to go. If you're not getting Kelsey, try to get whoever's the 4th tight end off the board in round 5, and then you're still in that tier of like elite competitiveness with the tight end position, but still getting really good value. Like, I'd rather go with Hawkinson in round 5 than Andrews round 4. But this team in the middle here is definitely one to worry about. That's a pretty solid build. If Henry stays healthy, if Pierce is back to what he was last year, then I kind of like this team quite a bit. But not the most receivers. Like, JSN, at the end of the day, is in a crowded wide receiver core, and Geno Smith is not the most reliable quarterback. So that's kind of interesting. But let's pay attention to these 4 teams. There's only 2 running backs on 2 of these teams, and then This team only has one, and then this team has zero. So I think running back is available in the 8th round, and that's probably the position to favor. So that's probably what I'm gonna do. Only one team that doesn't have a tight end, so there's also a decent like level of risk that we're avoiding by going running back over tight end. Let's hope Dave Montgomery's back on the board, because if he is, like, that's a top 20 ceiling, if not floor, that we could be banking in. I kind of feel like Montgomery could be more valuable than Jahmyr Gibbs. I know Gibbs is the first round pick, but they gave a big contract to Montgomery. I want to say like $8 million per season. He goes off, so never mind. But damn, it gets a little bleak the rest of the way. But James Conner is actually a big winner in Arizona. They also drafted linemen to help block for him, and even though Kyler Murray's not going to play there, like, holy shit, James Conner was a top 10 running back to finish the season. He was getting 20-plus touches per game, and I know it looks like a reach. His ADP was 88, but we mentioned there's very few teams with running back depth in these next 8 picks, and already another one goes off the board. I feel like Conner has that top 10 upside. He's not going to play a full season. He's prone to getting hurt, and he's definitely getting older, so there is some risk, but he's my RB3 on this roster, and he legitimately has top 10 upside if he continues that like 20 touch pace that he closed the season on. He has a lot of value. I like James Conner a lot, and I think going so late, he's really, really valuable. He's one of the few like clear 3-down backs in the NFL, and based on where he's going, he's really valuable. I'm still figuring out this layout during the live stream, so that's why things are like being fiddled with right now. But let me know if like there's something going wrong. I'm getting like a notification I'm losing some frames. But if you're enjoying this live stream, then do me a favor, hit a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's a code in the description. If you have never drafted on Underdog and you want to sign up, you can use code Nice and Blunt for a $100 deposit match when you make your first deposit there on Underdog. So make sure to use code Nice and Blunt and get some extra money to play around with. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're doing. We're prepping for our real draft, but these are also real drafts. They're best ball leagues, and there is a chance that you do win money at the end of the season. So I think that this is probably the best place to practice. Maybe I'm doing it very early. Like, I know not everyone does mock drafts in April, but now that we're right out of the draft, like, the ADP that's been set up before the draft has not adjusted properly, and there is some like possibly really good values. Like, I think James Conner is a really valuable pick. Maybe you disagree. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you agree with James Conner's value, who's his competition? Who is competing with James Conner for touches? And there's gonna be a lot of garbage time, even if they don't win games. James Conner can definitely be a top 15, top 20 running back, at least on a per-game basis in that offense. So I like him a lot, and I think taking him at pick 80 is emblematic of where you might need to reach to get him moving forward. But we do not have a tight end, and I feel like Evan Ingram is a significant tier break. While I do like Freiermuth a decent amount, if Najee Harris really hits, then he's going to vulture a lot of touchdowns. I think Ingram has the potential to be a true beast at the position. He was closing the season with a ton of upside, a lot of touchdowns, and they gave him the franchise tag. That's a pretty solid investment in terms of money that they give him. And even though they did draft a tight end, I'm not worried about him impacting Ingram. If anything, it would be Calvin Ridley coming into the mix that hurts his target share, but I think if anyone is a loser, it's Zay Jones, not Evan Ingram. I like Evan Ingram quite a bit. Let me check something. Nope, we're good. But yeah, he has some very good value. Let's take a look at the board again. What is going on? So Javonte Williams, James Cook. There wasn't a big run on running back that I was expecting. I guess nobody really wanted to reach as much as I did, but boy, Jamal Williams goes off at pick 81. That's really high. That's really high. I've been getting him like pick 110 sometimes. I think around the 100, 105 range. But after drafting Kendry Miller, I'm not as excited about Jamal Williams. I just can't be. Like, Kamara's going to get suspended, miss 6 games most likely, but at some point he comes back, and if they have Kendry Miller as well as Eno Benjamin, who they brought in, like, there's just too many mouths to feed. I like Jamal for those first 6 games. Definitely their RB1, but yikes, it'll get very tricky the rest of the way if there's like a lot of injuries that if there's no injuries that happen in that backfield following the return of Kamara. So that's a tricky pick. Look at who we're getting, like who you have available at this point, like Brian Robinson, Alexander Madison, James Cook. Everyone's in a committee. No one is in the same situation as James Conner. Like him and Rachaad White, I think, are 2 really valuable top 20 running backs that are going well outside the top 20 that I don't really offer you a more consistent floor and just better value than really anybody else that's going later than them. Everybody else is in a committee, and nobody else is in the situation like Rachaad White or James Conner after this point. So even though I did reach a decent amount, I don't regret that pick at all. Back to wide receiver, though, there's Zay Flowers on the board. I'm a little bit worried about OBJ staying healthy, and I love the talent with Zay Flowers, honestly. Like, I kind of wish my Chargers took him. Once Jackson Smith and Jigba was off the board, I was praying he fell one more spot, but once I looked at who was drafting ahead of him, the Seahawks, it was like, nah, we're definitely getting sniped. And then I was kind of pissed we went with Quentin Johnston in LA. I prefer Zay Flowers from a talent perspective. I feel like he could be the next Antonio Brown. He's a little bit shorter, but damn, his tape is really impressive. And while Quentin Johnston is very talented, it's just like, it feels like more of the same. I feel like they should have either gone Dalton Kincaid at tight end, because I don't trust Gerald Everett, and why not compete with Kelsey in the same division with an elite tight end of your own? Or I would have preferred Zay Flowers. Even Jordan Addison over Quentin Johnston was probably a pick I would have preferred on Thursday night for the Chargers, my Chargers, but Zay Flowers going to Baltimore, there's some really good potential. I love the stack, and I feel pretty good about having him as my wide receiver 4. I wouldn't want him as my 3, but he's on our bench, and we don't need him to hit every week, but there is some elite upside, and he will turn into a really, really good player at some point. Hopefully, OBJ doesn't ruin his value, but we're going with the stack. We're going with the Lamar Zay Flowers stack. If anything, later in the season, I think it has a higher chance to hit. I feel like Beckham's probably going to get hurt. He's always gotten hurt, and they overpaid for him just because he's getting 15 mil. Doesn't mean he's going to command, 12 targets a game, and Zay Flowers is going to be irrelevant. It's going to be a pretty solid committee in terms of all the receivers they have there. And I think Zay Jones is going to gain a lot of steam as the weeks go on. I like his talent a lot. So having the stack is pretty valuable. But our next pick, it's worth noting who is going to still be there at quarterback, because there is that injury risk with Lamar. And in my opinion, once you pass Russell Wilson, you are entering a vastly, vastly different tier at the quarterback position. Like, yes, you can scoff at Russell Wilson, but he does get Sean Payton. And in many ways, the comp for Russell Wilson throughout his entire career has been Drew Brees with legs. Last year, he didn't have much mobility, but he's still capable of being Drew Brees, and Sean Payton was the coach that really unlocked Drew Brees, and it's not like he's not going to know what to do with Russell Wilson. So if this team doesn't take him, I doubt the next team, who has 2 quarterbacks as well, takes him, and I'd feel really confident having Russell Wilson as our backup. Like, there's nobody else I'm as confident in after that. Like, Kyler's going to miss a significant portion of the season, maybe the entire season. Derek Carr in New Orleans, I don't feel too good about that. They don't have a ton of weapons, and he has a cap ceiling. Like, let's be honest. But thankfully they go Rashad Penny, and as long as this team doesn't go with their 3rd quarterback, they don't. We are in good position. Definitely Russell Wilson as our quarterback 2. You can argue we don't need a 3rd, and that's an advantage as well. But there's legit top 10 upside with Russell Wilson. I really looked stupid last year. He was terrible, and I had him as a top 5 quarterback. So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna bite and get trapped like I did last year by taking Russell Wilson as a top 5, top 10 quarterback. But where he's going, like, let's just take a look at the draft board. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Quarterback 18 is definitely his floor. If anything, that's good value on Wilson. And I think he's in the same class as Rodgers, Jared Goff, Geno Smith, and Kirk Cousins. And those are like my tier 3 of quarterbacks. Obviously, there's a top 3 elite. And then, like, once you hit quarterback 8 or 9, you will enter tier 3, and it's just a grab bag of who do you like. I think Daniel Jones is overvalued. I think Dak Prescott is overvalued. I think Anthony Richardson is overvalued. I don't think he's going to play a full season. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's really high potential for Russell Wilson and a higher floor as well than some of the guys I just mentioned, like Dak, Richardson, Daniel Jones. The value on him in round 10, Russell Wilson, really solid as our backup. I feel very confident with the Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson combo. We have a very good floor, very elite ceiling, and even if Lamar gets hurt, I think Sean Payton can unlock Russell Wilson, where by the end of the season, we're getting really good numbers, and that offense figures itself out and is really firing on all cylinders. I feel really... I'm very high on the Broncos, honestly. Like, I kind of feel like Nathaniel Hackett just intentionally blew the season so he could get out of there and be reunited with Aaron Rodgers. We're going to see if that's true, because Nathaniel Hackett looks like a great coach again. He's not the head coach. He's the offensive coordinator in New York, but you know, you're going to wonder, like, why was it so terrible? I don't think it's all Russell Wilson's fault. I think a lot of that is Nathaniel Hackett as the person to blame, and Sean Payton could theoretically completely turn around, completely fix everything in Denver. So I'm a believer in Russell Wilson this year, and for the value as quarterback 18, I don't think you are making a bad pick. That's not a pick that'll bite you in the ass. If anything, that's the floor, and you're getting fair value. But I think you're getting really good upside with him in the 10th round as your backup. But running back is a little bit shy at this point. Samaje Perine's really interesting. Algier lost a ton of value. Damian Harris, though, is actually listed as the starter on the depth chart in Buffalo. So there's a lot of touchdown upside. It's definitely a committee there, but Josh Allen should be running a lot less this year, and I'm not too worried about it. So Harris is really interesting. I like the Buffalo offense a lot. Perine's also interesting bet, but I feel like Javonte's going to come back. I'm going to go with Damian Harris, a very interesting player who has elite upside. Like, he could score 15 touchdowns in a season, and you wouldn't be shocked. He's done it before, and I don't feel like last year was really emblematic of, like, him falling off a cliff. I think it's just more so Belichick moving off of him and, not having to pay him, because he was going to become a free agent. You know, Belichick doesn't give a second contract to any running back, and Ramondre could handle the load. Ramondre was really, really solid for the Patriots, and I think it was just a unfortunate situation for Damian Harris. So he has a chance to shine replacing Devin Singletary in Buffalo. I feel like James Cook didn't quite play to the expectations I had for him last year, and even though there's more draft capital invested, I feel like if anyone's going to be the goal line back and capitalize on the value of the Buffalo offense for fantasy, it would be Damian Harris a little bit more so than James Cook. I can genuinely envision double-digit touchdowns for Damian Harris. It's a little harder to see that for James Cook, unless like 5 of them are in the receiving game. I think that's really more James Cook's bread and butter on third down in the passing game, whereas Damian Harris is a true first and second down type of running back, and especially on the goal line, that's where he's going to make his money. So if the rumors are true that even Josh Allen and the coaching staff acknowledge they need him to run a little bit less, I feel like Damian Harris would be the one who capitalizes and gains the most value if that is indeed the strategy in Buffalo, to run Josh Allen a lot less. So I feel like he's a solid pick going 37 spots later than James Cook. If anything, they're neck and neck. Like Devin Singletary and James Cook at the end of last season, they were very similar value type of fantasy players, and I don't think this 3 round gap is a fair price in terms of like how much you have to spend on James Cook and what you're getting with Harris a little bit later. So I definitely prefer the value on Harris than I do um, James Cook. But we only have 4 wide receivers, and we mentioned it gets a little thin kind of quickly. There's a lot of upside with KJ Osborne, but they drafted Jordan Addison. It's a little tricky, but boy, it gets pretty rough moving forward. Let's just go with KJ Osborne. I feel pretty good with that. When he does get into our roster, into our starting lineup, I think it will be like some high upside. And he fell to us. Like 10 spots is good value. Pick 137 as opposed to the 127 ADP. I can live with that. I'm not too upset about that. And even though he's our wide receiver 5, I'm not like super comfortable with that. We have such good talent at the top. We're not like expecting him to contribute week in, week out. There's also really good picks later on that we can get. And he is a valuable player, going 10 spots later than ADP. That's a solid one. Don't focus on Jordan Addison's season last year at USC if you want to like truly evaluate him. Look at that season from Pitt 2 years ago when he was with Kenny Pickett. Holy shit. Jordan Addison was elite. 1,600 yards receiving on 100 receptions in 14 games. I think he also scored like 17 touchdowns 2 years ago for Pittsburgh. Like, those are elite. And paired with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, there may be not enough targets for KJ Osborne to really realize that potential. So that's why I'm a little bit worried, but it could be worse. KJ Osborne is solid. Like, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Romeo Doubs, DJ Chark in this range. Also, a lot of question marks there. I'm comfortable with KJ Osborne. I think he's a decent, solid pick at this point. But I think tight end is a important position not to forget about. It's not like Ingram is like truly elite, not like a top 2 tight end. It's really just like upside with him. So having a solid floor as our backup would be good. I think Schultz in Houston is actually really interesting. Dawson Knox takes a huge hit. If anything, I think I'd prefer Kincaid. Kincaid does go off. I hate the Gesicki pick. Oh my god, that's not one I would want to make. But Dulcich I think is really interesting. A very high floor with him. Dulcich doesn't need a touchdown in order to get you 10 fantasy points. He could put up 70 receiving yards in a game on like 6-8 catches, and you wouldn't be shocked. So even if he doesn't score a touchdown, there is a lot of like weekly viability with Dulcich from a floor perspective. So I see him as a player that represents a tier break at that position, and him and Dalton Schultz I think are like tight end 11, tight end 12 type of range, and honestly they're like just as valuable as Kyle Pitts in my opinion. Like, I'm not a believer in Pitts. I think you really have to reach, and some players I love to get later are guys like Dulcich. Schultz is okay, but with a rookie quarterback and CJ Stroud, it's a little bit dicey and not like fully guaranteed. But those are the 2 players we're targeting. Schultz just goes off though, so every team between us and the next pick also has 1 tight end. That's probably a plan. And sometimes I get a little worried that like when you put players in the queue, if somebody else times out, they like snipe you intentionally just to fuck with you. Like, I feel like there's like an algorithm on this site that like doesn't want you to get who you really want for some reason or other if somebody else times out. So I don't love using the queue. I know who I'm going to take, and part of me is just a little paranoid that that is indeed true. It's happened to me before where like they're not the next player highest listed, but I have them in the queue and somebody times out and they fucking snipe me. It's like, what the fuck? How did that happen? But it doesn't happen. And Greg Dulcich is our guy, especially paired with Russell Wilson. That's a pretty good stack as well. Like, you know that Sean Payton knows how to use the tight end position, especially when they had Jimmy Graham. It was a really elite fantasy type of player. They did trade for Adam Troutman, though, and he's a solid receiver who has a track record in the Sean Payton offense. I don't love that, but I really liked what I saw from Dulcich last year. And even though they drafted Marvin Mims, I trust his floor. I do think Dulcich is a good player, And at this point, like, we're not counting on him week in, week out. I do think he's a solid pick. But there's a chance this does kind of bite me in the ass now that I, like, really think about it. The Troutman trade could fuck us over. And maybe Sean Payton wants to move off of Dulcich. Because he didn't draft him, after all. That was a different organization, different coach, and group of people that drafted Greg Dulcich. So we'll see what happens. But as our tight end 2 in round 13, I don't hate it. Pick 152 overall is solid value for your tight end 2. So Dulcich is a name to keep in mind, but now that I've made the pick, I kind of regret it a little bit. But Michael Mayer is probably in the same tier. Gerald Everett, also a bit of a surprise. I expected the Chargers to go tight end at least at some point in the draft, and they didn't. I am not a fan of Gerald Everett, to be honest with you, but he doesn't have a lot of competition. It's really just him and Donald Parham. And Everett had some good weeks of viability. He will score some touchdowns. So that's the tier break. I'm not, like, super convinced Taysom Hill has another elite season, but with the Kamara suspension, he early in the season, he always has that elite upside. But don't expect, like, 40 points a lot with Taysom Hill. That's very rare to repeat. So I don't think he's actually, like, that good of a pick. I'd rather go with Juwan Johnson than Taysom Hill in New Orleans at that tight end position. But Hill is decent. You could do worse. You could definitely do worse than him. But wide receiver starting to get thin. I like Jonathan Mingo. He had a good landing spot. High draft capital for him. It's not like you really believe in, like, DJ Chark. Adam Thielen is paid a decent amount. He's definitely the number 1 receiver to start the year, but I feel like he's probably going to get hurt at some point. It just feels inevitable, so a little worried about that situation. But then Jonathan Mingo is a big player, and wouldn't shock me if they went with him. Is it the short term or the long term? No, it's the long term. So I don't really want to reach on him. But you know who's, like, an elite backup? It's Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears is a player I have been drafting a ton before the draft, and his landing spot could really be problematic for fantasy purposes because he's going to be sitting behind Derrick Henry. But if anyone's going to get hurt this season, wouldn't it be Derrick Henry? Like, of all of the starting running backs, wouldn't it be the 29-year-old, if not 30-year-old, who's had, like, more touches than any other player in the NFL? Like, it was starting to get a little tricky with Henry at the end of the season. They sat him out a little bit. He got injured a little bit, but boy, if indeed Henry goes down, Tyjae Spears would vault into the top 10, if not the top 5. Tyjae Spears has the most upside if his starter goes down. He's like, it's hard to name another backup that doesn't have much weekly value if his starter is healthy, but has more value if his starter goes down. Like, holy shit, there's really elite upside with Tyjae Spears, and because of the landing spot, he might start to fall. I'd rather go with Spears than Kendry Miller. Kendry Miller's in a really crowded backfield, and while he may get more touches in the first few weeks, like, if Jamal Williams goes down or Alvin Kamara goes down in New Orleans, Miller is not going to have as high of a ceiling as Spears would if Henry goes down. So I guess I'm kind of repeating myself, but that's my logic here. Like, he's our running back 5. We're not expecting a ton from him, but if he does contribute, he's the type of player that could put up 20-plus points per week in the right circumstance. So not anybody else has that type of upside. Like, Zeke is no longer that player. He's not a 3-down back anymore. If anything, he's just a goal line back. Bigsby, very talented player, but sitting behind Etienne. Don't expect much from him. Jeff Wilson's in a bit of a committee, and they drafted Devin Achane. Raheem Mostert is also there, so it's a hot hand situation. Like, you can argue that some of these other players are a little safer, but nobody at this point has the ceiling of Tyjae Spears, the backup in Tennessee. So I think that's a pretty solid pick, and now we're at Round 15, my camera is running low on battery, so we might end the stream a little bit early. But let's just review our draft. We took Stephon Diggs in round 1, then Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 2, followed up with Lamar Jackson in round 3, followed by Najee Harris, our RB1, and Christian Kirk as our wide receiver 3. So we have a pretty good set of players at the top, and that's why I shifted to other flex positions and moved off receiver, as valuable as it is, after round 5. But then we went J.K. Dobbins and James Conner round 7. Maybe it was a slight reach on Conner, but he probably wouldn't have been there with our next pick, and I don't regret it at all. Get the guy you want. If you really don't believe that the odds are high, he'll fall to you with your next pick. But Evan Ingram, as opposed to Darren Waller, I think is similar value. Then we went with Zay Jones for the stack, Russell Wilson, Damian Harris, KJ Osborne, Greg Dulcich, and lastly, Tyjae Spears in round 14. But now we're back on the clock, and wide receivers always valuable. Tim Patrick, in terms of the stack in Denver, is interesting, coming off of injury. But John Mechie, there's nobody with more value this late, in my opinion, at wide receiver than John Mechie. Is it worth passing? Actually, no, I'm going to go with Michael Mayer. I think we'll probably get John Mechie with our next pick. But Michael Mayer was somebody that I kind of regretted maybe not taking instead of Greg Dulcich. And he fell here, like, ADP 163, pick 176 is where we got him. Like, the fuck? It's the opposite of what should have happened post-draft. He had one of the best landing spots for, like, any tight end. He went 3rd overall, fell to the 2nd round. The Raiders traded up to get him, and they traded away Darren Waller. They do not have a replacement for him. They don't even have Foster Moreau anymore. Michael Mayer is one of the most polished, ready-to-go tight ends entering this year's draft at the rookie position as a rookie. And as our tight end 3, there's a ton of value here. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to know how to use him. There's not a ton of competition. Like, yes, they have Adams. They brought in Jacoby Myers, but I don't worry too much about Hunter Renfrow. Michael Mayer is probably going to put up at least the numbers Moreau was putting up last year. Like, Moreau, when he was the starter, was a lock for at least 35 receiving yards every single game. Even if it was on one catch, he'd put up 35 yards. Sometimes he'd score a touchdown. Mayer is a better player and also a great blocker. He's going to be on the field a ton, and that's the type of value you want. Either Mayer or Laporta this late. Really valuable tight ends. I think they might actually be more valuable than Dalton Kincaid because they don't have to compete with Dawson Knox. Depth chart, tight end 1 on their respective teams. So I love Mayer this late. Really good value. And as our tight end 3, I think we can probably move off the position. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm glad I took him because no way he'd be back on the board here. We'd probably be settling for Laporta, if not hoping for Laporta. And we can still probably get John Mechie, who, holy shit, is poised to be the wide receiver 1 in Houston, especially with C.J. Stroud going there. Like, there's some good upside. Yes, he's coming off a torn ACL. Yes, he's coming off of leukemia and chemotherapy, but according to the coaching staff, he is good to go. He is doing just fine, and he's going to be ready for the offseason training camp. Holy shit, they drafted him in round 2, and he fell. He should have been a first-rounder last year. I think he's better than Jamison Williams, and we're going to take him, and the camera just died. So